Assalamu alaikum, viewers. Welcome to another episode of Amal. It's me, Syed, hosting it this week. And with me, my guests are our well-known Mohtarama Syeda Rizvi, our brother Shabar Zadi from Georgia, Atlanta, and the Nakhvi Sisters from Birmingham. Today, it's going to be a little bit different. We're going to try to sort of approach a topic which is quite heavy in its content, but we're going to try to sort of delve into it in a way that we look how it affects our youth. Now, the topic itself is basically about how young Muslims in the West represent Islam to a non-Muslim society. Now, so before we go into it, I wanted to sort of give a bit of a historic background to how events historically sort of certain events can take place and they can have a sort of a massive change in society. I mean, like, for example, if we take World War I, for example, I mean that World War was initiated by the assassination of Grand Duke Franz Ferdinand. Now, that assassination of that one individual led to World War One, and on the back of that, the World War started in 1914, ended in 1918, and on the back of that one event, which behaved like a catalyst, we ended up with 17 million dead people and 20 million injured. Now, if we sort of go forward and just sort of look at certain other historical events, this is just to give the viewers a bit of a flavor of how certain events, how sort of they seem quite banal, but their effects on society are quite gross, and they create such a change. Now, some people may be familiar with Emmett Hill. Now, he was a 14-year-old boy who was born in Chicago in 1955. He went, to visit his family in Mississippi. His extended family, he went there. And with his cousins, he went to a grocery store. He interacted with a lady in the grocery store who was the wife of the owner. And on the back of that, a few days later, two white men sort of came to his home, intimidated his family and kidnapped him and took him away in a car. His family were powerless to stop them. In 1955, segregated Mississippi, and 3 days later his body was found, horribly tortured, mutilated, and murdered. Now, on the back of that, his mother, she was an incredible individual. When she went through the funeral services, she had an open casket. She invited everyone. There was thousands of people who attended his funeral, and all the national newspapers, the news media was there, and even international media was present, and they showed the horrible, mutilated, tortured body of this young boy. And on the back of those events, I mean, the sad thing is the sad indictment of the system of the sort of segregated society that existed in 1955 was the two individuals who were sort of arrested for the murder of this young black boy. Those two white men were then exonerated of his killing by an all-white jury. But nevertheless, the mother of this murdered black boy, she took on the whole system, and this move of having an open casket sort of woke up the whole society. And on the back of that, the then laws that were in place that segregated the society were, over time, it woke up civil society, and the civil rights movement was awoken, and it galvanized the civil rights movement in fighting against this oppression, and it galvanized all of American society, whereabout eventually black Americans were given the civil rights that every other American had, and the segregation was finished. I mean, okay, we can have an argument of how, effective this was with, the George Floyd atrocity, but that's a discussion for another day. But it sees that how one event of this killing of a young boy sort of galvanized the whole society to wake up and to stand up for their rights and to bring a change. Now, on the back of that, so if you go forward in history, we, obviously the 9/11 events are familiar to all of us. And in September 11th, 2001, you had the terrorist attacks in the United States. Approximately 3,000 people were killed. And on the back of that, the war on terror began. Now, if you look at the results of the war on terror, you can see, I mean, even sort of estimations, the American estimations of how many people have been killed up to now from 2001 in this war on terror, they estimate roughly about 500,000 people have been killed directly on the war on terror. Indirectly, it goes into the millions. Indirectly means people who have died by the destruction of infrastructure where healthcare has been affected. So they've died from complications of healthcare. Food provision hasn't been available. They've died of that. Sort of healthy drinking water hasn't been available. So all this infrastructure that has been damaged due to this war on terror has had the knock-on effect of killing other innocent people. So, if you look at what's happened in connection to that, and obviously if we move on from the 9/11 atrocities to, our own in the UK, we had 7/7, 2005, the tube bombings and so forth. But the point I'm trying to make is these events have an effect on the ground to people living in day-to-day life. Now, for example, if going back to my own experience, after the 7/7 bombings that took place under the Underground in London, and also in connection that there was also a bombing on a double-decker bus in London in 2005, in 7th of July. My own personal experience, and I think it's quite apt if I sort of bring my own experience into it. I think a day after that, I was on the bus for some. I was going to work. I had my hospital uniform on, and I had a rucksack. I caught the bus, paid the fare, and I sort of came onto this single-decker bus. It was mostly, it was quite full because it was during the time everybody's making their way to work. I got onto the bus. I had a beard. I was Asian looking. I had a rucksack on my back, and this was just on the back of the terrorist attacks in London. After I boarded the bus, I noticed, I was aware that everybody on the bus was looking at me, and I could feel everybody was watching me. And I felt, I don't know why I did it, and I even now think back, and I can't really explain why I did it. But I turned around to the bus and the people and the passengers on the bus, and I said, "Don't worry, this is the bag has only my lunch." And I actually opened my rucksack up and I showed it to the passengers on the bus, and I said, "I've got my lunch in there," and I had a few books. Now the bus was quite full, and there was an elderly lady who was sitting there, and initially there was an initial calm that fell instantly. There was a calm once I showed them that there was all I had in my bag was, my sandwiches and a couple of books. But then I could feel that there was some kind of sort of everybody on the belt felt some kind of humiliation that, this guy, we made him feel that he had to sort of show us his contents of his bag. And the elderly lady that was sitting at the front of the bus, she moved up and said, "Son, do you want to sit down next to me?" And I did, and I sat down next to her. And she just looked at me. She put her hand on my knee, and she said, "Look, I'm really sorry for this." And that's the only communication we had with each other. But we looked at each other, and we had a recognition that I don't know why I felt compelled to put everybody on the bus at ease that I wasn't a terrorist, even though I suppose, if we start social profiling, I probably fitted the profile. I was brown, I had a beard, and unfortunately I was also carrying a rucksack. And when I boarded the bus, it frightened everybody else on the bus. Even over time, I've sort of thought about this event, and I don't know how to sort of dissect it. clinically to sort of explain my actions and also explain the actions of the average person on the bus. But it's just an indictment of how an event can have a knock-on effect at a local level. Okay, now going forward to Muhtarama Syeda Rizvi, I would sort of like to put the same question to you. That after all these events that we've gone through, the war on terror, the 9/11, the 7/7 events, on a personal level, have you experienced anything that you could relate to these events? Any changes or any approach by people towards you that you could say that it changed their perspective of you as a Muslim?
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. I'm very grateful and thankful that you have made me a part of this program as a guest today. Inshallah, Allah bless you with more tawfiqat khair, that you carry on with this kind of thing which we need and living in this society where we have our youth which is completely ignored and they are the big part of this society and it's a platform आपने जो शुरू किया कि जिसमें हम young बच्चों को लेकर आ रहे हैं alhamdulillah, and this is a dream come true for me really, because हम हमेशा ये सोचते थे कि बच्चों का यहाँ पर आना, बच्चों का ऐसे प्लेटफॉर्म से आकर इजहार ख्याल करना and share their feelings and their thoughts with us is very important. 9/11 का भी जिक्र किया, 7/7 जो यहाँ इस कंट्री में हुआ उसका भी जिक्र किया. तो बहुत सारी ऐसी चीजें हैं कि जो तब्दील हुई. So many had changed. I remember I was working as a teaching assistant at that time in a secondary school, and although it was a school where 70% people and the students were like from Muslim background, और staff भी जो है वो ज्यादातर मुस्लिम बैकग्राउंड से था, लेकिन जाहिर है वहां पर और लोग भी मौजूद थे. So after these incidents, उन लोगों के questions बहुत ज्यादा शुरू हो गए थे. I don't know they had this in their mind that I have the answer to all their questions, but whenever they spoke out, whenever they asked, I tried my best to give an answer. हिजाब के ऊपर बहुत ज्यादा questions शुरू हो गए, because obviously आप काम पर जाते हैं, आप हिजाब पहन कर जाते हैं. I was wearing hijab. उसके ऊपर बहुत सारी questioning, क्यों पहना जाता है, Islam had oppressed the women, and these kind of things were asked frequently. फिर इसके साथ साथ मस्जिदों में जो जमातें होती हैं नमाज के लिए, जुमे की नमाज में, उसमें आप लोग क्या प्रीच करते हैं, कैसे करते हैं, लेकिन अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह हम ये नहीं कह सकते कि खुदा न खास्ता किसी ने हम पर कोई इस तरह का अटैक किया. although there are so many incidents we hear about कि जहां पर उन बच्चियों पर, उन खवातीन पर मुख्तलिफ तरीकों से अटैक किए गए कि जो हिजाबी थी. देखिए, एक इंसान का या एक ऑर्गेनाइजेशन का अमल can never justify the whole nation, because if we justify like that, then if we look into history and if we look into the incidents taking place around the world, there is so much we can sort of pinpoint. Yeah, अब मसलन USA की बहुत सारी ऐसी चीजें हैं, बहुत सारे ऐसे इक़दामात हैं कि अगर हम उनके बारे में सिर्फ सोचें तो हम ये कहने पर मजबूर हो जाएंगे कि पूरी नेशन यूएसए की शायद टेररिस्ट है, पूरी जो नेशन है यूएसए में रहने वाले तमाम लोगों की वो लुटेरे हैं. लेकिन ऐसा नहीं होता, क्योंकि आप एक इंसान या एक ऑर्गेनाइजेशन के अमल से पूरी नेशन, पूरी कौम या पूरे एक तबके को जस्टिफाई नहीं कर सकते. So yes, there have been so many things which have changed. लोगों का एटीट्यूड हमारे यानी हम लोग, जाहिर है कि जो एक मुस्लिम खातून है वो चलती फिरती रिप्रेजेंटेटिव है इस्लाम की और अल्लाह सुब्हानहू व तआला. सबसे पहली ये चीज. तो जो खवातीन जिन्होंने जो हिजाब पहनती हैं, और इन मामलात के बाद भी बहुत सारी हमारी खवातीन अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह, न सिर्फ ये कि मुस्लिम खवातीन बल्कि नॉन मुस्लिम ladies who have converted to Islam, they converted in a way that they're so strict with their hijab and with their salat, with lots of things. शायद हम जो मुसलमान घरों में पैदा हुए हैं ना, वो लोग भी शायद इतनी सख्ती से इस्लाम पर अमल न करते हों जितनी सख्ती से हमारी वो कन्वर्टेड बहनें. اسلام پر عمل
بے
کرتی
شک بے
ہیں.
شک.
بھی بہت سارے آئے ہیں, نیگیٹو چینجز بھی بہت سارے آئے ہیں, اور پرسنل ایکسپیرینسز کے حوالے سے بہت کچھ ہے جو کہا جا سکتا ہے, لیکن حجاب بالخصوص اس کے یہ ان انسیڈنٹس 9/11 اور 7/7 کے بعد حجاب اور خواتین میں حجاب جینٹس میں ان کی داڑھی کو ایک اس طرح سے جسٹیفائی کر لیا گیا ہے کہ یہ لوگ پتہ نہیں کہاں سے آگے ہیں, ابھی کے ابھی اپنے آپ کو ختم کر کے ہم لوگوں کو اڑا دیں گے. لیکن دس از اے ویری رانگ اپروچ. حجاب پہننے والے آپ کو لوگ ڈاکٹرز ملیں گے, سرجن ملیں گے, داڑھی والے لوگ آپ کو ناسا میں کام کرتے ہوئے نظر آئیں گے, who have دس انٹلیکچوئل اپروچ, ان کی ایسی اتنے جینیس ہیں, اتنا کچھ وہ دنیا کے لیے کر رہے ہیں, اتنا کچھ دنیا کی بہتری کے لیے کر رہے ہیں. تو پلیز let's not forget what they do positively. Just because some people, a group of people decided to do certain acts, and those certain acts also, it's not just an act of an organization. There is so much on the background which nobody wants to talk about. اس ایک
پر
سرٹن انسیڈنٹ کے پیچھے وہ 9/11 کا ہو یا 7/7 کا ہو, کون کون سی طاقتیں کار فرما ہیں, who was behind it actually, who was funding it? There are lots of
پر سب سے
questions, but anyway I
پر
don't
سب
want
سے
to
بڑے
go
محترمہ
far ahead with
ادھر
this
میں یہ بات
question.
ضرور کہوں گا کہ ان ایونٹس کو سارے مسلمانوں نے کنڈیم کیا.
Condemn کیا, بالکل.
جو مین سٹریم مسلمان تھے ساروں نے کنڈیم کیا, ساروں نے
ایک
کیا
بات
کہ
ہم
اسلام کے روح
آپ
کے
کی
خلاف
بات
ہے.
سے بالکل آپ کی بات سے ہم اتفاق کرتے ہیں, اور یہاں ایک جملہ ہم ہمیشہ کہتے ہیں اور یہاں پر بھی اس کو دہرائیں گے کہ ہم اتنا ضرور کہیں گے کہ وہ اسلام جو بنی امیہ سے لیا گیا, اس اسلام نے یہاں پر آپ کو 9/11 اور 7/7 جیسی مثالیں قائم کر کے دکھائی ہیں, لیکن جو
بے شک
اسلام اہل بیت علیہ السلام سے لیا گیا اس کی مثال آپ کے سامنے ہے. کہ کبھی بھی کوئی بھی شیعہ حیدر کرار, کوئی بھی اہل بیت علیہ السلام کا چاہنے والا, ماننے والا, کسی کے اوپر کسی قسم کا اٹیک نہیں کرتا, معصوموں کی جان نہیں لیتا. اگر انہیں اپنا ڈیفینس کرنا پڑتا ہے تو وہ فقط ڈیفینس کرتے ہیں, وہ افینسو وار یا افینسو اٹیک جو ہے وہ نہیں کرتے. تو یہ فرق ہے اسلام میں بھی, کہ جو اسلام غلط ریسورسز سے لیا گیا, the Islam
بے
which
شک.
was taken from wrong resources is showing you the result as 9/11 and 7/7. But the
نہیں
Islam
بالکل
taken from the right source, from the source of Ahlul Bayt or Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, will show you the positivity and the nature of Islam.
یہ اس بات کے آپ کے ساتھ بالکل اگری کرتا ہوں. بس ایک اس میں ایک فیکچوئل بات بھی کر لیتے ہیں, جن لوگوں کو 9/11 میں جنہوں نے یہ ایکٹ پرپیٹریٹ کیا تھا, وہ 95% وہ فرام سعودی اوریجن. اس بات کو ذہن نشین کرنی چاہیے اس بات کو. they were سعودی نیشنلز, اور سعودی نیشنل کا جو مسلک ہے وہ آپ کے سامنے ہے, جو القاعدہ جو جس مسلک سے وہ وابستہ ہیں وہ آپ کے سامنے ہے, جو الشباب ہے جس مسلک سے وہ وابستہ ہے وہ آپ کے سامنے ہے. تو آپ کو ایک بالکل صحیح تفریق سامنے نظر آتی ہے کہ اہل بیت کے ماننے والے کدھر کھڑے ہیں اور اہل بیت کے جو ان سے مخالف ہیں وہ کدھر کھڑے ہیں. بے شک وہ اپنے آپ کو مسلمان کہہ رہے ہیں, پر ان کی جو جس سورس سے وہ اپنی آئیڈیالوجی لیتے ہیں وہ آئیڈیالوجی انہیں کدھر لے کے جاتی ہے. اچھا, اسی بات کو اپنے بھائی سے, back to my brother Shabar in Atlanta, Georgia. The same question to you, brother. I mean, obviously, you are probably slightly older than the millennials. Like we discussed earlier, you were born in mid 90s. You were probably only an infant when the events of 9/11 took place. But it would be very interesting for the viewers and myself to see what perspective you have on there. How society that you grew up in, you went to school in, how they viewed you as a practicing Muslim. Please, brother.
The weird thing is, when we were speaking earlier about this, we actually used to live in New York when 9/11 happened.
Oh, yes,
So,
okay.
yeah, so that's why my dad actually clearly remembers, but the only thing that I can remember from it was I think we were in second grade at that time, and the only thing,
Okay.
it was just like fire alarms were going off, and we just had to rush out. And because luckily from where we used to live, our elementary school was right across the street, so my mom was waiting for us outside, and we had no idea what was going on. So in our head, it was definitely an emergency because of the fire alarms and all the alarms going off. And then we just ran downstairs, and then all I remember is just people running everywhere. And then we just saw my mom and we went straight to the house. And then I think it took my dad about 16 hours to get home. And
Oh
back
dear.
in that day, there were no cell phones or anything like that.
Yeah, yeah.
So
They weren't as
we were
popular.
all super worried. Right, right. So we were super worried, and then my dad still tells us to this day that where he was working, he felt the impact of the towers going down, and then that's when
Oh
everybody
dear.
started running. And yeah, and it's pretty crazy because we were definitely like a part of that, if not firsthand, because my dad was actually firsthand part of it, in
Of
terms of
course, yeah.
watching what happened. Yeah, just the whole chaos that was going on through New York, and then that was my initial experience on that. But towards going back to school, I think we were off for another 2 weeks from school as well, and then just going back and getting readjusted. So everyone had that fear um embedded into your brain at that point, where like you don't know when the next attack would be or what you're going to hear next or when the alarm's going to go off. So the thing was, they started implementing evacuation plans for elementary school or middle school or high school,
Yeah.
which is first grade to 12th grade here. So that was my initial experience on that.
On the back of that, because this is actually, I mean, if I would have known this, I would have asked you to, I would have invited your father onto the program as well to give his sort of first-hand experience. I mean, hopefully in the future, if we sort of continue with this sort of vein of conversation, I may well elicit your help into recruiting your father into sort of sharing his experiences with us, because obviously he was on the ground in New York on that
Yeah,
day, and it would be quite interesting to sort of hear his perspective on it and the fallout on the back of
right,
it, how in the preceding weeks, months, and years, how he felt, within New York as a Muslim, how it affected him and his family. Obviously, you were quite young, so I suppose your perspective would be a lot more. So it's going to be a lot more different to your father's perspective. But I mean, so
definitely.
just taking that further with you, Shubber, I mean, how did sort of so now as an adult, do you believe those events still sort of color certain people's uh, sort of portrait of Muslims, or do you think it's less so now?
I feel like now it's definitely better than what it was maybe a few years back. So we do live in the South.
Yeah,
We live in Georgia, which is the southern part of the United States. So it's still considered the
yeah,
South.
South, yeah,
Some people call it the dirty South, which is Alabama, Georgia, Florida.
yeah,
Um, so being here, it's completely different than being in New York or the north part of the United States. So here uh, there were like a few years back where you would overhear people in the grocery store of just making like sneaky racial slurs or something like
yeah,
that, and then you look back and then you see them walking away real fast or just running away from you. So
yeah,
that was definitely embedded into people where they knew like, okay, I see like a brown skinned man with a beard, or like as Sarapa was saying that if you see somebody wearing a hijab, they automatically think or they automatically relate it to you know somewhere it's kind of in relation to 9/11 in some sort. But
I
I
mean,
was actually watching this thing where media has a lot to play with it too,
of
where they
course, yeah,
show that they show like a bombing, and then right after that they'll show you a Muslim.
yeah,
So
exactly, yeah, yeah.
they have influences as well. But
Stereotyping.
what I feel like now, it's definitely better that these days where we're more comfortable going out because of how mixed it is now. Majority of the people are not white anymore. especially in the
It's
area
much more
that we
mixed
live in.
society. Mhm.
It's definitely, yeah, definitely. Now it's even in our neighborhood when we first moved in here, um, it was mostly white people and Koreans here and there. So my
Yeah.
dad was saying कि खुशबू के लिए उन्होंने पाकिस्तानी भी रख दिए यहाँ पे. So that's why but now we see a mixture of people throughout the neighborhood. So it's whenever you're taking a walk outside, you can definitely say hello, and everybody kind of sort of lives together. But that's only because of the drastic change within the last couple of years of everyone moving towards this area. But of
So
course, when you
basically, what
because we go. Mhm.
so basically so basically the change in demographic. So as more Muslims moved into the area, the more interaction
Mhm.
there was with the indigenous white population, they began to realize that the Muslims are very much like us. Their
Yes.
wants, their expectations, their fundamentals are the same as us. They're not an alien species. So it's basically,
Mhm.
again, I think it shows that it's ignorance that breeds racism. That once you break
Definitely.
down the barriers of ignorance and you start interacting with each other, you begin to realize what the commonalities are. And that's, I mean, it's a very good point you made. I mean, just a quick one. After the election of Donald Trump, what was the situation then in the area and in the local community that you lived in? Was there any change then
I
due to the
mean,
election?
oh man, like I said, Sajjad, like we live in the South, so you know, I mean, I want to say this in the nicest way possible, but when you see a big truck with big wheels on it, I can guarantee 100% on the back of the window or back of the trunk, you're gonna see a Trump logo on there, Trump
Okay.
2020 or anything like that. So, but it's funny because the freedom of speech here is actually, it plays a big part of it. So every time somebody drives by, everybody just looks at them, and then if it's in a parking lot, you can definitely have a conversation with them, but it's not like you judge them based on what they have. But it's pretty much, it works the same way where you're like, oh man, this guy voted for Trump. But
Mhm.
nowadays it's kind of turning against him now. So it's
Yeah.
basically, even my neighbors, they're white. There's a lawyer and her husband. So we speak often about this matter too. So she was saying that, she was like, I supported Trump, but now that we've experienced it, like their mentality is completely different. And then back to what you were saying earlier, it's like you're basically representing who you are, whether you say hello to somebody or how you respond when they say good morning or hello to you. So that kind of plays a lot, because a lot of my neighbors, it's mostly whenever I'm driving around the neighborhood or leaving for work, you just wave hello, and that's the end of it. But then when you do have a one-on-one conversation with them, it's like that's when you're really representing who you are. But you set that, it's preset from when you just drive by and just wave hello to them.
Yeah.
So that plays an
Well,
important
thank you
role
for
in
that
my
input. I
opinion
mean,
too.
it's a. I mean, I think the views, because obviously, I mean, this was the first time I knew that you were originally from New York, and that your father was, you were directly sort of impacted by the events, and you realize how small the world actually is. Moving on to Maida Naqvi and Zainab Naqvi, the Nakhvi sisters. So just putting the same question to you, Maida. Um, you know, I would imagine, just sort of tell us what experiences you think you've sort of experienced through your school life, through contact with wider society. Um, Anything that you can sort of relate and sort of say that your Islam has colored other people's reaction to you. I think you may have to put your mic on. We can't hear you.
It's on.
Okay, carry on. Yep. I can hear you
Okay,
now.
okay. So I think I've been lucky in the way that I haven't experienced racism in the magnitude that you guys have. But there have been the odd time, because I went through primary school and secondary school and college all in predominantly areas in which they were just mostly Muslims and mostly Pakistani. So I was never really exposed to a lot of areas where it was, you know, people who held stereotypical views about Muslims or people wearing hijabs or men with beards and things like that. But through primary school, there were times like when I think my mom was actually there when this happened, but when I was actually told not to wear my hijab in school because it was called a health and safety hazard, me wearing my hijab and as well as that there were times when we had things like activities where we were doing things like swimming, and we were told that obviously during swimming you're not exactly wearing things that are covering your entire body. And so we were always told that we weren't allowed to wear, you know, full coverage things when we're going swimming, or if we're wearing a hijab, we can't wear that because that was a health and safety risk, and things like that. And I remember, regardless of the school that I went to, we had, you know, 95% of that school was all Muslim and Asian and Muslim. Wait, Muslim and Asian, yes. And even though being surrounded by so many people that were like me, nobody ever stepped out and said that you know what these rules were wrong and that this was a violation of us not being able to practice our faith and our religion. And it was only until I got into school that my mom came and complained and said that, you know, it's wrong that we're not allowed to wear our hijab and practice our faith, and it's wrong that we can't fully cover ourselves when we go swimming. And it was only a few years after that I left that I heard that there was a change in that school. But yeah, it's just disheartening that even regardless of being surrounded by people that are like me, there was no change.
So
that
I mean, obviously, I was directly part of that, and undoubtedly, your mother had a very sort of galvanizing effect in the school. And I think on the back, because she fought very hard for you guys to be able to wear your hijab, and this, the reason that they gave that was a health and safety hazard. I do remember speaking to the principal. I said, you know, why is it that it's the girls with a hijab are at risk of spontaneously combusting, nobody else is. So if anybody else just wears a scarf, that's okay. But if it happens, the scarf it happens to be called a hijab, it becomes a health and safety risk. But eventually there was a change within the school, and they did allow them to wear their hijabs. And they, I mean, regardless, you know, Maida and Zainab, they both wore their hijab all the way through school. And when they went swimming, they wore the full halal. I mean, I can't see think of a better word to use than the halal swimsuit that they wore when they went swimming. So they still participated in all the activities, but they participated within the parameters of their faith. And I think, you know, we all, I mean, sometimes it seems difficult for us to follow the parameters of our faith in a society that isn't Muslim. But, you know, our faith doesn't change with the passport that we carry. It doesn't matter what passport we carry, our faith is always going to be the same. It's the one constant that we all have. So we have to be able to fight for the faith that we follow without fear. But anyway, I think I'm going to ask Shabbat if he doesn't mind, if he's able to recite something at this juncture for us. And we will be greatly appreciate any contribution you can make, Shabbat, please, if you can recite something with us with your great voice.
Definitely.
If you don't mind, brother.
Definitely. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad
Ala Muhammad wajjal farajah.
Ali aaye मुझ पे मुश्किल की जो घड़ी आए मुझ पे मुश्किल की जो घड़ी आए میرے لب پر علی علی آئے. یہ جو سچے باپا ہے ان کے چھوٹے بھائی بادشاہ چچا ان کا لکھا ہوا کلام ہے. میرے لب پر علی علی آئے, اپنے بھائی کو میں زباں پایا,
کیا بات ہے, سبحان اللہ.
اپنے بھائی کو میں زباں پایا, عرش اعلیٰ پہ جا نبی آئے, فتح خیبر علی کے نام رہی, فتح خیبر علی کے نام رہی, یوں تو لڑنے کو تھے سبھی آئے, یوں تو لڑنے کو تھے سبھی آئے, تول کر ذوالفقار بولے علی,
ماشاءاللہ,
تول کر ذوالفقار بولے علی, لے کے مرحب کا سر ابھی آئے,
کیا بات,
لے کے مرحب کا سر ابھی آئے, میرا مولا ہے راز کے دو جہاں, میرا مولا ہے راز کے دو جہاں, کیوں میرے رزق میں کمی آئے, کیوں میرے رزق میں کمی آئے. اور اسی کلام میں میں نے تھوڑی سی طب آزمائی کی ہے تو وہ پیش کرتا ہوں میں, کہ جب بھی کعبہ دعائیں مانگتا ہے,
بہت اچھا,
جب بھی کعبہ دعائیں مانگتا ہے, حیدر وہاں چلی آئے,
نعرہ حیدری,
یا
بادشاہ ہوں غلام حیدر ہوں, بادشاہ ہوں غلام حیدر ہوں, میری ٹھوکر میں کیسری آئے, میرے لب پر علی علی آئے, پر محمد والے محمد بلند ترین صلوات.
اللہم صلی علی محمد
محمد
وجل فرج. Excellent, Brother Shabir. I mean, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give you more energy and increase the wealth of your knowledge and give us more recitations from your wonderful voice. Just going forward now, back to Mohtarama Sahar. Now, मैं आपके साथ यही सवाल अब ये पूछना चाहता हूँ कि आपकी नज़र में हमें एज मुसलमान हमें क्या करना चाहिए, क्योंकि ज़ाहिरी बात है हम एक नॉन मुस्लिम माशरे में रहते हैं और जो हमारी स्टेरियोटाइप बनाई जाती है, it's not accurate and it's quite false and it seems more like a propaganda tool against us. So how और हम कैसे उसके खिलाफ अकीमात उठा सकते हैं to fight against that image and portray the right authentic image of Islam?
There will be two things I will be saying in order to answer your question. Is first, I would recite an ayah from Quran, Surah Nisa 144. Ayat number is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states that Ya ayyuhallazina amanu la tattaqizul kafirina awliya'a min dunil mu'minin aturiduna an taj'alu lillahi alaykum sultanan mubina. यानी अल्लाह फरमा रहा है कि ईमान वालों खबरदार मोमिनों को छोड़कर काफिरों को अपना वली न बनाओ और सरपरस्त न बनाना। क्या तुम चाहते हो कि अल्लाह के खिलाफ सरीही दलील करार दो? एक कुलिया है, एक फॉर्मूला है जिंदगी को गुजारने का। अल्लाह सुब्हानहू व तआला ने नबी मुकर्रम, अभी हम आगे जिलहज में ईद गदीर भी मनाने वाले हैं इंशाअल्लाह, नबी मुकर्रम को भी उनके ओहदे से पुकारा। हालांकि कुरान में कहीं अल्लाह ने या अय्युहर रसूल बल्लिग इस तरीके से लहजा इख्तियार नहीं किया है, लेकिन जहां पर विलायत की बात आई, नबूवत के इख्तिताम के बाद विलायत के इब्तदा और आगाज की बात आई, तो अल्लाह ने रसूल खुदा सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम के लिए अपने लहजे को बदल दिया। जब हम उन लोगों को अपना सरपरस्त बना लेते हैं कि जो सरीहन सामने सामने अल्लाह की बनाई हुई लिमिट्स को न सिर्फ क्रॉस करते हैं बल्कि तोड़ देते हैं, जब हम उन लोगों को की चापलूसी और खुशामद करके खुश होते हैं कि जो इस्लाम के दुश्मन हैं, जो अल्लाह के दुश्मन हैं, जो जमीन पर अल्लाह की मखलूक पर जुल्म करते हैं, तो फकत अपने आप को बचाने के लिए वो क्या कहते हैं इंग्लिश में, यू स्क्रैच माई बैक आई स्क्रैच योर्स। अपने आप को फकत बचाने के लिए कि नहीं भाई हमारा घर बस कायम रहे, हमारा घर बचा रहे, इसलिए हम अप्रेसर का साथ दे देंगे, साथ ना भी देंगे तब भी न्यूट्रल हो जाएंगे। दिस इज नॉट इस्लाम। इस्लाम डजंट टीच अस दिस। इस्लाम इज क्लियर इन नरेटिंग अम्र बिल मारूफ व नही अनिल मुनकर। जहां गलत हो रहा है उसको गलत कहो, जहां सही हो रहा है उसको एनकरेज करो। ठीक, अब ये देखिए हमारा भाई है छोटा शब्बर, इसने पढ़ा, इसने मनक़बत ख़्वानी की, इसका अंदाज, इसकी गुफ्तगू का तरीका, इसका तर्ज बयान इनका जो है बेहतरीन है। एक यूथ की हैसियत से, एक जवान की हैसियत से, he can give so much positive image, so much positivity in his society as a representative of Islam and the representative of the school of Ahlebait अलैहिमुस्सलाम। अब एक जवान क्या कुछ कर सकता है इसकी तरफ भी इंशाल्लाह आप आएंगे तो बात करेंगे, लेकिन ये चीज कि जब आप उन लोगों को छोड़ दें कि जो नेकूकार हैं और आप ऐसों को दोस्त बना लें कि जो सरीहन इंसानियत ही के दुश्मन है, खुजा ये इस्लाम, इस्लाम की तो बात बाद में, इस्लाम की असास इंसानियत है। इस्लाम लफ्ज ही अमन से निकला है, सलामती से निकला है। इस्लाम मीन्स पीस। द बेस ऑफ इस्लाम इज द ह्यूमैनिटी। ह्यूमैनिटी कम्स फर्स्ट इन इस्लाम। लेकिन वो लोग जिनका ह्यूमैनिटी से ताल्लुक नहीं है, आप उनके आगे सरबा सजूद हो जाएं तो फिर आप किस तरह से कामयाब हो सकते हैं? पहली तो चीज ये है, जैसा कि आप देख रहे हैं कि बहुत सारी सुपर पावर्स जो बना लिया जिन्होंने अपने आप को, हालांकि सबसे बड़ी सुपर पावर अल्टीमेटली इज अल्लाह सुब्हानहू व तआला। लेकिन जब लोगों को अल्लाह भूल गया, दुनिया ही दुनिया रह गई, तो उन्होंने ऐसों को अपना सरपरस्त बना लिया कि जो इंसानियत ही के दुश्मन है। कितने कितने इंसानियत सोज जराइम भी ये लोग करते हैं, तो कोई भी مسلمان ملک فقط ایک ملک کے کوئی ان کو کنڈیم بھی نہیں کرتا ہے. یہی بات ہم یہاں پر کوٹ کریں گے آغا خمینی، امام خمینی رحمت اللہ علیہ، کہ انہوں نے یہ فرمایا تھا کہ امریکہ کی دشمنی سے زیادہ اس کی دوستی سے ڈرو. ٹھیک ہے، پہلی چیز تو یہ ہے. دوسری چیز، ہم کس طرح سے اپنے آپ کو اس قسم کی سچویشن میں ریپرزینٹ کریں یا کس طرح سے ہمیں وہ کرنا چاہیے، وہ یہ ہے کہ ہمیں اس چیز کا احساس ہونا چاہیے کہ ہمیں عزت اور ذلت اللہ دینے والا ہے. وَتُعِزُّ مَن تَشَاءُ وَتُذِلُّ مَن تَشَاءُ. اور ہمارے پہلے امام امیر المؤمنین علی ابن ابی طالب علیہ السلام فرماتے ہیں الہی کفا بعزا ان اکون لک عبدا، اے اللہ میری عزت کے لیے تو اتنا ہی کافی ہے کہ میں تیرا عبد ہوں. وَكَفَى بِفَخْرًا أَن تَكُونَ لِي رَبًّا، اور میرے فخر کے لیے یہ کافی ہے کہ تو میرا رب. جب ہم نے رب کو نہیں پہچانا، جب ہم اس کی معرفت کو حاصل نہیں کر رہے اور ہم کہہ رہے ہیں یا علی ہم آپ کے چاہنے والے ہیں، ہم آپ کی ولایت پر اقرار کرنے والے ہیں، لیکن علی علیہ السلام ہمیں سمجھانا کیا چاہتے ہیں، بتانا کیا چاہتے ہیں، وہ ہمارے دلوں میں ہمارے ذہنوں میں آتا نہیں ہے، تو پھر ظاہر ہے کہ ہم ذلت ہی میں جائیں گے نا. ذلت ہی اللہ ہمارے نصیبوں میں لکھے گا. اور آپ دیکھ لیجئے کہ پوری دنیا کے نقشے پہ کتنے سارے اسلامی ملک ہیں جن کا یعنی نیشنل ریلیجن ہی اسلام ہے، لیکن آپ دیکھیے جا کر ان ملکوں میں آپ کو کتنا اسلام نظر آتا ہے. وہ اسی وجہ سے ہے کہ ہم خود سب سے پہلے تو خود معرفت، اپنے نفس کی بھی معرفت، پھر اس کے بعد اللہ کے رسول کی معرفت، پھر اس کے بعد امام زمان کی معرفت، قرآن کی تلاوت، قرآن کا سمجھنا، یہ سب چیزوں جب ہم ان چیزوں کو اپنی زندگی میں پریکٹیکلی لے آئیں گے نا آغا، تو انشاءاللہ اللہ نے عزت مومنوں کے لیے ہی رکھی ہے. اللہ نے یہ فرمایا ہے نا کہ عزت جو ہے وہ وَلِلَّهِ الْعِزَّةَ وَلِرَسُولِ وَلِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ، قرآن کے اندر موجود ہے کہ عزت اللہ، اس کے رسول اور مومنین کے لیے ہے. جب مومنین اپنے اسٹیشن کو پہچان لیں گے، جب ان کو پتا ہوگا، جب بوڑھوں کو پتا ہوگا کہ ان کی ڈیوٹی کیا ہے کہ وہ جوانوں کو انکریج کرتے رہیں، جب جوانوں کو پتا ہوگا کہ ہم نے کس طرح سے اسلام کی پازیٹیو پکچر دینی ہے، جب جوانوں کو یہ پتا ہوگا کہ ہم کس طرح سے چینج لے کر آ سکتے ہیں. بڑے بڑے انقلابات کے پیچھے ہسٹری آف ہیومینٹی آپ اٹھا کے دیکھ لیجئے، دیر از یوتھ لے کر آتی ہے چینج.
اچھا، مہربانی محترمہ سحر، ہم اب we'll go straight to the Nakhvi Sisters, so if they can bring their kalam forward and recite for us, please.
باواز بلندر صلوات.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa alayhi Muhammad wa ajil faraj.
عزت خدا کی فاطمہ
ماشاءاللہ
بنت نبی بطول ہے. عزت خدا کی فاطمہ بنت نبی بطول ہے. وہ جس کے احترام میں، وہ جس کے احترام میں در پہ کھڑے رسول ہے. بنت نبی بطول ہے. عزت خدا کی فاطمہ بنت نبی بطول ہے. عزت خدا کی فاطمہ بنت نبی بطول ہے. سجدے کرے ہزار تو دل میں ہو بغض فاطمہ. سجدے کرے ہزار دل میں ہو بغض فاطمہ، دل میں ہو بغض فاطمہ، جنت میں تو بھی جائے گا، یہ سوچنا فضول ہے، جنت میں تو بھی جائے گا، یہ سوچنا فضول ہے، عزت خدا کی فاطمہ بنت نبی بطول ہے جو بنا الہ الہ خیر النساء کا لال ہے جو بنا الہ الہ خیر النساء کا لال ہے، خیر النساء کا لال ہے، جس کے لیے نبی نے کیا سجدوں کو اپنے طول ہے، جس کے لیے نبی نے کیا سجدوں کو اپنے طول ہے، عزت خدا کی فاطمہ بنت نبی بطول ہے، ہر شے دو جہان کی ان کو جہیز میں ملی، ہر شے دو جہان کی ان کو جہیز میں ملی، ان کو جہیز میں ملی، مجھ کو قسم خدا کی فدک ان کے قدم کی دھول ہے، مجھ کو قسم خدا کی فدک ان کے قدم کی دھول ہے، عزت خدا کی فاطمہ بنت نبی بطول ہے، وہ جس کے احترام میں، وہ جس کے احترام میں در پہ کھڑے رسول ہیں، بنت نبی بطول ہے، عزت خدا کی فاطمہ بنت نبی بطول ہے، عزت خدا کی فاطمہ بنت نبی بطول ہے۔ بآواز بلندتر صلوات۔
اللهم صل على Muhammad وآل Muhammad وجل فرجهم. Thank you so much to the Naqvi sisters for sharing the recitation with us, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increase your tawfiq, inshallah. Now we've reached the end of our program, and I'd like to thank all my guests, specifically Brother Shabbar, the Naqvi sisters, and Mohtama Sahar. I would just request Mohtama Sahar to end the program with a lovely dua, as you normally do. So if you can end the program with a dua, please. Bismillah.
Inshallah, may Allah bless you with more tawfiqat, all of you. اور یہی دعا ہے کہ پروردگار عالم ہمیں توفیق دے کہ ہم دین کی، قرآن کی اور اپنے وقت کے امام کی معرفت کو حاصل کریں، اور اسلام کی خاطر جب تک ہم زندہ ہیں، اسلام کی خاطر، انسانیت کی خاطر اپنے وقت کو جو ہے وہ گزار سکیں، کچھ انسانیت کی خاطر ایسا کر سکیں کہ جس کی وجہ سے اللہ سبحانہ و تعالی اور ہمارے وقت کے امام ہم سے راضی ہوں، ہم سے خوشنود ہوں. اور اس کام کے لیے ہم ہمیشہ اپنے جوانوں، اپنی یوتھ کو مخاطب کرتے ہیں کہ پروردگار عالم ہماری یوتھ کو وہ نظر، وہ بصیرت اور وہ جذبہ، وہ ایموشنز عطا کرے جو ٹرولی فار ہیومینٹی اینڈ فار دا گریٹر گڈ آف ہیومینٹی اور اللہ سبحانہ و تعالیٰ کی محبت اور اس کی رضا کے لیے ہوں. اس لیے کہ جس سوسائٹی کے، جس نیشن کے جوان بیدار ہوتے ہیں، وہ سوسائٹی پنپتی ہے، وہ ترقی کرتی ہے، ان کا فیوچر برائٹ ہوتا ہے. تو اس دعا کے ساتھ کہ پروردگار عالم ہمارے جوانوں کو بیدار کرے، ہمارے جوانوں کو ہر ان چیزوں سے کہ جو انہیں خدا سے دور کرتی ہیں ان سے دور کر دے اور ان کو خدا کے قریب اور کلوز ہونے کی توفیق عطا کرے. اور ہم سب کو ہمارے سمیت پروردگار عالم ہر مسلمان، ہر مومن کو یہ توفیق دے کہ اپنے عمل کو درست کرتے ہوئے اپنے وقت کے امام کے ناصران میں شامل ہونے کی توفیق کے ساتھ اس دنیا میں زندگی گزارے اور مرنے کے بعد بھی امام کی آواز پر لبیک کہنے والوں میں شامل ہوں انشاءاللہ. بہت شکریہ.
Thank you so much, Mohtarama Sahar, and I would like to sort of end the program with hopefully all our mu'mineen who are watching. May Allah keep you safe, and inshallah we will meet again next week. Khuda Hafiz.